Hey summer sew campers, we're doing project number 8, which is a super handy tote bag that you can totally use to put library books, supplies, crafting supplies, sewing supplies. Tote bags are so handy, and you can make this with whatever fun fabrics you like. So, you ready to start sewing?
We're working on project 7, which is our tote. You're gonna need your half yard of your outer fabric, and I chose this fun plum, and if you see, it doesn't have any direction on it. For the inner fabric, I chose this cloud fabric, and it definitely does have a direction. This is the top of the cloud, and this is the bottom of the cloud, and I'm going to want to pay attention to that as I cut my pieces. I also have some of the leftover interfacing from one of our previous projects. So I'm going to be using this. It's actually a little bit smaller than the 4 inches by 20 inches that I need, but I think I should be able to get enough out of this. So from both this fabric, the lining fabric, and the outer fabric, I need to cut 2 pieces that are going to be 12 inches by 14 inches. So I'm going to take this fabric and I'm going to turn it right side in like I did before, and that's just so that I can draw on the wrong side of the fabric. And remember, I've got my selvage edge here, and I want to draw my lines away from the selvage edge, and I need a piece that's going to be 12 inches by 14 inches. I've got my instruction sheet here. I know my page is 8.5 by 11 inches, and I need 12 by 14. So if I start by just drawing this, this is 8.5. This is 11. Now I want 12 by 14, and I have this directional fabric. I want my 14 inches to be the height and my 12 inches to be the width. So I just need to take my ruler and add ½ inch to my 8.5 by 11 to make this 12 inches. And I need it by 14, so if I turn my piece of paper, this is 11 inches. So I just need to add 3 inches to the top. Make sure you line everything up nice and straight. There we go. So I'm adding 1, 2, 3 inches to the top. And then I'm going to go ahead and extend these lines. Now if you want, you can draw this on the second set of fabrics. So you can, this is my lining fabric, I've drawn on my lining fabric. You can draw on your outer fabrics as well. I'm just going to go ahead and cut through all 4 layers at once because I feel comfortable doing that. But if you don't feel comfortable for any reason, no worries. Just redraw this on the back of your other set of fabrics and then cut that out. Now notice, I'm not going to cut this all the way to the edge, and there's a reason for that. It's because I need to cut my strap piece, and that is my 4 inch by 20 inch piece. And I'm going to want to cut that out of here on my outer fabric. So if I cut all the way across here, I won't have a 20 inch long piece to be able to cut that from. Okay, so that is all of my lining pieces and my outer pieces for my bag cut. So now I need to go ahead and cut those handles. I don't need the lining anymore, so I can put that away. I'm just doing the outer. And since I'm drawing lines again, I want it to be on the back of my fabric. So I need a 4" by 20" piece. Now, if you don't have a ruler like this, you can take your piece of paper and you can just fold it in half like this, and that'll be 4 1/4. And then you could measure a 1/4 inch in and cut that off. Or you could just do a 4 1/4 inch and then go all the way out to 20 inches. That honestly would be fine for your handles. Your handles would end up being just a little itty bitty bit wider, and it's really not a big deal. But I do have this ruler, so I'm just gonna go ahead and mark it with this ruler. And this ruler is 3 1/2 inches wide. So I need to go a 1/2 inch, I need to go 4 inches out like this. Okay, so this was 4 by 12 1/2. And if I want to make my math a little easier, I'll say that's 4 by 12 right there. So I just need to add 8 inches onto that end to make my 20" handle. So there's my 4 by 20" handle, and I'm gonna go ahead and cut that out. Okay, now it's time to cut my interfacing. And if you have a big enough piece, you want to cut it into 2 4" by 20" strips. I don't have quite enough here, so I'm going to cut mine into 3 4" strips, and that will just about make my 20 inches that I need, or well, 2 sets of 40 inches that I need for my piece here. And I'm actually going to flip this over so the bumpy side is down, because the smooth side is going to be much easier for me to write on with my fabric marking pen. I want to fuse this interfacing onto the back of my handles. And if you are using an ironing board that is also being used for clothes, you want to lay a tea cloth or old shirt or something down over the ironing board to protect it, because if any of this bumpy stuff, which is really the glue, melts onto the ironing board, it can actually get on clothes later on when someone irons those clothes. So you want to protect your ironing surface from getting any of that glue on it. And you also want to protect your iron. But honestly, it's a little bit easier to clean it off your iron once it's cool than it is to ever clean it off the ironing board. So I'm just laying this on top, and then there are instructions right on the package of how to fuse this on. So now I'm gonna stitch my handles, and that's pretty simple. I'm gonna sew it in half, and then using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, I'm just gonna stitch from one end all the way down on both handles, and then I'm gonna flip them right side out. Now, if you want, you can pin these, but I feel like I'll be fine just lining up that edge and stitching, but it's totally up to you and what you feel comfortable with. And then you don't have to stop sewing, you just want to sew past your end, and then you can tuck your next one underneath with just a couple stitches of thread in between. You want to do your needle up, then your presser foot up, and then you can cut your thread, and you can also cut the thread between the two handles. Now it's time to turn these right side out. Now there's a couple different ways you can turn them right side out. You can just use your fingers like this and turn it. And since this is a kid series, I'm assuming that you have smaller kid size hands, and so this might be a little easier for you to do. There are lots of tools that are out there that are designed specifically for turning tubes like this. So if you ask your parent to Google tube turning tool, and you can look at those together. There's all kinds of options out there, and some of them are really, really awesome. There are also techniques that you can use. You can use a bodkin, you can use a safety pin. So there are all different kinds of ways. I'm going to show you just the no tool way of getting this turned. But if you plan on making a lot of these, like if you're going to make a bunch of these bags for Christmas gifts, I would totally recommend getting a tube turning tool. All right, so we're going to go ahead and speed this up because you get the idea. Okay, so now we have our two strips. You want to take the seam, which is that line that you stitched, and kind of put it down the middle of the back. It doesn't have to be exactly the middle-ish, pretty close to the middle. And now we're going to press these flat. Now we're going to take these over to the sewing machine and we're going to edge stitch. That's about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge on both sides of both straps, just to get a nice pretty line and also to keep these straps from getting all twisty as we use the bag. Stitching together the outside of the bag and the lining of the bag are almost identical. We're going to take both layers, we're going to put them right sides together. So this is both outsides, and for the body, so we have both of our outside fabrics together, and then we'll do this again with both inside fabrics. And then you're going to pin around 3 sides, leaving the top open. If you have a directional fabric, so that's a fabric that has an up and down or a left and right, you want to make sure that your sky is up here and your ground is down here. So that's the outside. I'm going to do my inside. This one does have a up and a down. So I want to make sure that both fabrics are facing up is up, up is up. Now the difference with the lining is that when this is sewn, you're going to want to give yourself a good hole at the bottom of your stitching. At least a 4-inch opening, and that's going to be used to turn this bag right side out so that all your seams are tucked away neatly on the inside of the bag. Now, if you're like me, as you sew, you forget about this part. And it's super easy to have that happen because you're just so used to going zoop, 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 and sewing all the way around. And yes, that's totally what it sounds like. Zoop, zoop, zoop. So I'm going to put 2 pins here because I'm going to start here. I'm going to sew. I'm going to pivot. I'm going to sew to here, and the double pin is going to remind me, oh, that's right, I need to give myself a 4-inch opening. And that's just one of those ways to give yourself a visual cue. So if you are watching TV while sewing, or you're having a conversation with a friend, or you're sewing with a friend, that you don't get so lost in what else is going on that you forget what you're supposed to be doing with your design. I'm going to go ahead and sew the outside of my bag. And remember, we always remove the pins before we stitch over them. When you finish with the outside, you can go ahead and start the inside. Just leave a couple stitches between the finishing this one and starting this one. Now remember, when you get to these double pins, we're going to pull them out. We're going to stitch about up to where they were, and then we're going to lift our needle up, lift our presser foot up, and give ourselves that 4-inch gap. There we go. Needle up, presser foot up, and cut your thread. And cut the thread between the two. Okay, we have both stitched. We're going to clip our corners, which means the corners where it's stitched at a right angle, I'm going to cut away the extra fabric, and I'm going to leave a couple threads, a little bit of space between my stitching and where I cut away. And I'm going to do that on the 2 bottom corners here, and then the 2 bottom corners on my lining. And what this is called is, it's called removing the bulk, and it's taking away the extra fabric in here so that you don't have lumpy corners, you have nice, sharp, pretty corners. There we go. So now the lining, which has the hole in it, has these 2 long threads. And I like to clip those because they sometimes get in the way when you're trying to turn it. Let's just go ahead and clip them now. And then I'm going to turn my lining right side out for now. And then I'm going to take my bag. Oh, almost tried to put it in the bottom, which isn't going to work because there's stitching on the bottom. And I'm going to put this right inside. So I'll have right sides together because the right side of the outside is facing in and the right side of the inside is facing out. And so those 2 will come together. And then I'm going to find the side seams, and I'm going to put one in one direction and one in the other direction, and then pin. I'm going to do the same on the other side. So this seam I'm pushing in that direction, which means this top seam I'm pushing in that direction, and that should make it easy to line up where they are. That's called nesting the seams, when you can feel it all line up pretty right there. And then I'm going to add that pin. So now we're going to add our handles before we do any more pinning. And we have this seam, and that is the inside of the bag. So we want the seam, so that seam side, to face the lining. And it's going to make a U kind of loop like this with the top, and then it kind of loops up, and then the top, right? So we're going to tuck that in the bag, and we're going to pin the handles in place, and it's being tucked between the outside and the lining. And for your hand, I would do a full 4 fingers. For kid size hand, for my hand, I'm going to do about 3 fingers. And that gives you a good measurement if you wanted to get out a ruler and say, okay, I'm going to measure 2 inches, and that's where I'm going to put my handle perfect. And then it's just between these 2 layers. And then pin it in place. And now the other side, also 3 or 4 fingers. Line everything up. And pin it in place. And as long as I'm on this side, I'm going to add a pin here. And add a pin here. And add a pin here. There we go. So that's one side done. I'm going to flip it over and do the same thing again. Turn so that I have the right sides up, not the side with the seam. Take it, tuck it between just the 2 layers on this side. And 3 fingers. And tuck it. Other side. Three fingers. And we're just pinning these 2 layers. Just the outer layer and the inner layer pinned together. And you're making sure that these edges are all lining up. There we go. So now you should still have a bag that opens up in the middle with pins all the way around. So we're going to move this over to the sewing machine, and we can actually remove this tray, and that gives us a little more space. And what we want that space for is to be able to put our bag just completely over the sewing machine, so we don't accidentally get the other layer inside because it's wrapped around the machine like this. And then just pick a spot to start, and because we've got these layers coming together and we don't want to hold the top, go ahead and give yourself larger than a 1/4 inch seam allowance here. Feel free to go slow and then pull from the bottom to bring all of the fabric to the front. You can see it's getting all bunched up at the back again, so I can pull down here from the bottom and bring it all towards the front again. So I've got nice smooth fabric. When you get back to where you started, just go back over where you stitched a little bit. Heel up, press your foot up, and cut your thread. Go ahead and leave this part off of the sewing machine for now. We're going to be doing this a second time when we top stitch this top. Because our bag is all put together, and we're going to reach inside the lining where we have our hole at the bottom of our lining. You can just grab your bag and pull it through. And you have this wonky, weird bag thing, and that's totally fine. You want to take the lining and put it back inside your bag. Use your fingers and really poke out those corners. Get it nice and pretty. Now you're going to go ahead and finger press to get this top nice and pretty. You want from the outside to really only be able to see the outside of the outside fabric. If you can see just a touch of the inside fabric, it's not the end of the world. But you really, from the outside, just want to see the outside fabric. And from the inside, it means you'd only see the inside fabric. Once we've got that more or less finger pressed, we're going to use our iron. I'm going to give these layers a press. You just want a nice, pretty top edge to your bag. There we go, we have this nice, pretty top edge. We're going to go ahead and do a top edge stitch all the way around just here on the bag. So we're going to want to make sure that these handles stay out of the way. So we're going to do the same thing as before. We're going to put the bag over the sewing machine. I'm putting these handles out of the way, and just 1/8 inch from the edge, I'm going to stitch all the way around. Make sure you keep everything flat and keep those handles out of the way so they don't get like rolled up under and stitched into your bag. If that happens, just rip out those seams and go ahead and restitch. When you get back to the beginning of your stitching, go over a little bit and then a little bit back and forth just to lock everything in place before needle up, presser foot up, and then cutting your threads close to the fabric so that everything's hidden. We have one final step before our bag is done, and that is to stitch up the hole in the bottom. So we had this hole that we had in the bottom for turning, and I'm just going to pop this out, the lining out, and then tuck the flaps back into the hole. If you wanted, you could hand stitch this closed, but it's going to be at the bottom of the lining of the bag and no one's ever going to see it. So I say go ahead and do a very secure stitch on your sewing machine so that you know nothing will get sucked up into that hole, and it's also quicker to do this way. So I just pin that closed. I'm going to take it over to my sewing machine and about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. I'm going to stitch forward, back, and forward again as I start. And you want to make sure that you're going close to this edge so you're getting all 4 layers because we folded everything in. When you get to the end of your hole, back, forward and back, needle up, presser foot up, cut your threads, and tuck your lining back in your bag. And there you go, a super fun, super simple tote made with whatever fabrics you want.
Wasn't that so fun and easy? And these totes make a great gift. If you're looking for a green way to wrap a gift, make a tote, put the gift inside, and it's a fun way to give a gift where the wrapping is reusable and totally part of the gift itself. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you here soon for the next in our Summer Sew Camp video series.